It seems you know the people around you well, confident in your ability to recognize toxic personalities, sense negative energy, and define boundaries in behavior. But what if the real threats are hidden much deeper? What if the most dangerous people can be charming, kind, and even members of your own family? And while you strive to protect yourself from obvious villains, you unwittingly open the doors of your mind to something far more perilous, the invasion of another person's unconscious into your own. Carl Gustav Jung dedicated his life to exploring these hidden dynamics. In his work, Ego and the Unconscious, he reveals that most of our actions and decisions are determined not by conscious control, but by deep unconscious processes. And this applies not only to you, but to everyone around you. This is precisely where the danger lies. When a person is unaware of their own shadow, that shadow begins to seek a dwelling place, and often, you become that dwelling place. Perhaps you've never thought about this, but it's worth considering now. How often have you felt emotionally drained after interacting with certain people? How often have you been accused of actions you didn't commit, or been called upon as a savior in situations that had nothing to do with you? Jung called this projection, an unconscious mechanism where a person transfers qualities they refuse to acknowledge in themselves onto you. At this moment, you cease to be an individual and transform into a symbol, a mirror, an imagined enemy, or an idealized hero. And all these images share one thing: none of them have anything to do with your true essence. The most terrifying part is that you might not even be aware of your participation in this game. You sincerely believe you are helping, showing empathy, and behaving maturely. But at the same time, you are immersing yourself in another's psychological field, trying to resolve conflicts that don't belong to you, and becoming a victim of manipulations based on dynamics you didn't create, but which now control you. And this isn't just about ill-intentioned people. Jung emphasized that the greatest danger comes not from conscious villains, but from those who have not integrated their shadow, who live alienated from their own psyche, under the sway of masks, traumas, complexes, and repressed desires. They are not evil, but they are dangerous. And this danger creeps in unnoticed, gradually infiltrating your life day by day through subtle remarks, hidden accusations, and pregnant silences until you begin to doubt yourself. And when you lose connection with your own psychic reality, you become part of another's shadow. Perhaps you are experiencing something similar right now, in a relationship, a friendship, at work, or even within your own family. And perhaps you blame yourself, trying to understand what's wrong with you. But the answer is simple. There's nothing wrong with you. The problem is that you are being used as a container for someone else's unconscious. In the following sections, we will explore 6 types of people Jung considered emotionally dangerous. These types act not out of malice, but under the influence of internal forces they themselves are unaware of. And that is precisely why they are so destructive. Drawing on Jung's works such as Ion, Ego and the Unconscious, and Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, we will show how to recognize these archetypes. But most importantly, you will see that one or more of these profiles might also be present in yourself. Are you ready for this? Then take a deep breath and prepare, because once you know this, you will no longer be able to look at people, or even yourself, the same way. Imagine a situation where you have to share your life with someone who blames you for all their experiences, turns your presence into a painful trigger, and makes you feel responsible for emotions that have nothing to do with you. At first, Such a person might seem vulnerable, sensitive, and profound, but over time, it becomes clear that you are being drawn into someone else's struggle, where you are inherently in a losing position. This is the unconscious manipulator, a person unaware of their own psychological traumas, projecting them onto others as a defense mechanism. As Jung said, what we do not make conscious appears to us as fate. And often, this fate has a name, a face, and might be sitting across the table from you. The unconscious manipulator is driven by repressed experiences, unintegrated traumas, and unprocessed emotional fragments. Instead of turning inward, such a person directs their attention to you, turning you into a canvas for their internal conflicts. They live in a state of constant projection. Jung asserted that projection is an inevitable function of the psyche, but if left unrecognized, it becomes destructive. In Ego and the Unconscious, he emphasized that projection causes a kind of psychic blindness, turning the other person into a symbol of something hidden within ourselves, stripping them of their individuality. This is precisely what the unconscious manipulator does. They don't see you as a person, but only as a lost part of themselves, reacting to it as if it were real. Such people often play the victim, shifting responsibility for everything onto others. When they feel anger, they blame you, claiming you provoked them. When they are sad, they accuse you of disappointment. When they feel inadequate, they believe you are putting yourself above them. This distortion is so subtle that you begin to doubt yourself. Was I truly insensitive? Did I say something wrong? Am I toxic? Thus, the manipulation occurs without shouting or direct demands. It's emotional, subconscious, and highly effective. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that such people often possess charm, charisma, sensitivity, and an aura of emotional depth. This creates a trap, making you believe you can help them, heal them, and understand them better than anyone else. In reality, however, you sacrifice your mental health trying to save someone who refuses to look within themselves. And the more you try, the deeper you sink into this situation. Jung warned that such projections are particularly dangerous because they assign us a symbolic role: savior, enemy, traitor, father, mother, anyone but who we truly are. To live in a symbolic connection is to live in an illusion where you are no longer perceived as an individual, but seen only as a distorted reflection of another's unconscious. The only way to protect yourself from an unconscious manipulator is to develop awareness, recognize behavioral patterns, and sever the invisible threads connecting you to that person's emotional world. Most importantly, constantly ask yourself if you are truly feeling what you feel, or if it has been suggested to you. The unconscious manipulator does not forcibly invade your life. They enter through a breach in your empathy. Having recognized this mechanism, it's important to understand how it masquerades even deeper, hiding behind the persona, a person who not only projects their problems onto others, but lives to appear as someone they are not. Next, we will examine the phenomenon of the persona and the psychological danger it represents, according to Jung. While the unconscious manipulator merely projects their conflicts onto you, the persona wearer can draw you into a world where you forget who you truly are. Psychological danger can lurk not only in destructive behavior, but also in apparent perfection. A perpetual smile, a regal posture, an impeccable appearance. All these can be alarming signals. In an age where the external predominates over the internal, such a tendency, in Jung's view, poses a serious threat. Excessive identification with the persona, the social mask used for adaptation, risks losing connection with the true self. A person who lives for the mask not only loses themselves, but also distorts the perception of those around them. In his work, Ego and the Unconscious, Jung emphasizes that the persona is not what a person is, but how others perceive them. It is an artificial construct, shaped by social, family, and professional expectations. The persona itself is not evil. It is necessary for fulfilling social roles: doctor, teacher, friend. The problem arises when a person identifies exclusively with this mask, locking away everything spontaneous, vulnerable, and authentic deep within their psyche. The persona wearer is a master of functional superficiality. They say what people want to hear, behave correctly, and avoid conflict at all costs. However, behind the mask of control lies a tormented soul. The more they maintain the image, the more they suppress their true self, and this suppression will eventually make itself known. The impact of such a person on others can be devastating. There's a sense that something is off, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly what. In relationships, there's a lack of spontaneity, sincerity, and depth. Everything feels rehearsed, pre-scripted. Moreover, the persona wearer projects their desire for perfection onto others, demanding conformity, compliance, and participation in this charade. Any display of emotion, doubt, or pain causes them discomfort and rejection, reminding them of what is suppressed within. Jung warned that identification with the persona is one of the main threats to the process of individuation, the path of self-knowledge and integration of the unconscious. The danger arises when a person becomes hypnotized by the role they play, identifying themselves with how others see them. The desire to be accepted, recognized, and praised turns them into a hostage of their own facade, behind which their authentic self suffocates. Living next to such a person makes you doubt your own spontaneity, control yourself, weigh every word, and hide parts of yourself that don't fit into the ideal image. Gradually, you too begin to wear a mask, often without realizing it. Coexisting with a persona wearer is not just artificial, it's contagious. But there's a darker side. The suppression of feelings, thoughts, and desires doesn't disappear without a trace. It accumulates and ferments in the unconscious, transforming into the shadow. And then we enter the dangerous territory of denied emotions, ready to erupt with explosive force. Next, we will examine the figure of the suppressed shadow owner, who refuses to acknowledge their dark side until it breaks free. There are individuals whose lives seem to be models of self-control, composed, tactful, impeccably correct, and moderate in all things. However, behind this polished facade of restraint lies a colossal yet suppressed energy, striving to break free. Everything they deem unacceptable, repulsive, or wrong is meticulously pushed into the darkest corners of their soul, instead of being understood and transformed. This is the essence of a person with a suppressed shadow, an individual striving for light until the accumulated darkness takes over. Carl Jung, the eminent psychologist, dedicated a significant part of his work to the phenomenon of the shadow. In Ion, he asserts that the shadow is the sum of personality aspects that an individual refuses to acknowledge in themselves, but which nevertheless persistently manifest in one form or another. It's not about external evil, not about some other or enemy. The shadow is the inner content of the psyche. This can be unacknowledged hatred, rationalized envy, suppressed sexuality, or ambition disguised as modesty. Everything a person rejects in themselves doesn't disappear without a trace but transforms into the shadow. And, as Jung rightly claimed, the unconscious aspects of a person's personality govern their life, determining their destiny. At first glance, the owner of a suppressed shadow poses no apparent danger. On the contrary, they often inspire admiration for their discipline, kindness, and willingness to help. However, there's a certain peculiarity in their behavior. They cannot tolerate displays of weakness in others, react negatively to spontaneity, and become irritated by strong emotions. Such a person is constantly in a state of emotional tension but never explodes until they do, and then the consequences are devastating. They live in a state of constant emotional vigilance, not allowing themselves to feel and condemning those who do. They don't tolerate their own mistakes and therefore attack those who err. Thus, they become a moralist, a demanding and controlling person, which is merely a desperate attempt to keep the unconscious in check. Jung emphasized that the stronger the persona, social mask, is developed, the more suppressed the shadow. And the stronger the suppression, the fiercer its manifestation will be. This behavior pattern can be observed in people whose reactions are disproportionate to the situation, who explode over trifles, hold grudges for years, or passively aggressively sabotage relationships. These are the difficult people whose bitterness, touchiness, and criticality remain a mystery to those around them. The answer lies in an unacknowledged, unintegrated shadow. It is important to understand that the shadow consists not only of negative traits. Jung asserted that it also contains unrealized potential, suppressed creativity, and hidden strength. However, when the shadow is ignored, all of this turns into a corrosive poison that infects relationships, the environment, and especially loved ones. Living next to an individual with a suppressed shadow is like being on a minefield. You never know where you'll step wrong or when an explosion will occur. However, this suppression doesn't arise from nowhere. It is often fueled by an illusion of superiority and rigid moral principles that turn guilt into a tool of control. Here we approach the next personality type, the moral controller, who not only suppresses their own desires, but also makes others feel guilty for living their lives. This type, according to Jung, is one of the main obstacles on the path to psychic freedom, a guardian of virtue, hiding their own demons deep within their soul. Not every arbiter of fate is cloaked in a mantle and wields a sword. Sometimes crosses, strict rules, rigid dogmas, and rote phrases become the weapons. These individuals typically claim to be driven by high ethical ideals, unwavering righteousness, and strict moral standards. However, deep down, they erect prison walls around themselves and others, weaving them from threads of guilt and all-consuming shame. Carl Jung deeply understood this archetype, noting that when morality becomes merely a facade behind which true intentions are hidden, it transforms into one of the most sophisticated forms of personality suppression. This phenomenon is known as the moral controller, a person who, instead of accepting and integrating their shadowy side, prefers to project it onto others, condemning them for the qualities and actions they cannot accept in themselves. In everyone's life, such a character has surely appeared, someone who tirelessly points fingers at others' flaws, but never bothers to look within themselves. Such people strive to position themselves as an epitome of impeccable behavior, not because they genuinely are, but because of a desperate need to maintain the illusion of their own moral superiority. According to Jung, The stronger the suppression, the more pronounced the need to project the shadow onto others. This is precisely what the moral controller does, turning those around them into sinners, deviants, and immoral individuals, just to avoid a painful confrontation with their own hidden desires, uncontrollable impulses, and internal contradictions. The peculiarity lies in the fact that, unlike a typical emotional manipulator, the moral controller genuinely believes they are doing good. They are convinced that their actions are aimed at correcting, saving, or educating another person. This is precisely what makes their influence particularly toxic, as it is cloaked in the mantle of authority, good intentions, and false spirituality. Their criticism is often accompanied by phrases that sound like noble guidance. This is solely for your own good. Believe me, in time you'll thank me. Or, someone has to open your eyes to the truth. However, this truth is far from objective. It is steeped in projections and personal biases. In his work, Ion, Jung meticulously analyzes the figures of Christ and Antichrist as archetypal embodiments of wholeness and dissociation. The moral controller is convinced they are a bearer of light and untruth, while completely ignoring their own inner darkness. They project evil onto others to maintain the illusion of purity and impeccability within themselves. This makes them blind, dangerous, and incapable of understanding the multifaceted nature of the human soul. Interacting with such a person can lead to a constant feeling of guilt, a sense that you are always wrong. Even when you are simply living your life, there is a feeling of being under scrutiny, subjected to judgment and humiliation. The saddest part is that over time, you begin to internalize this judgment, suppressing your natural, human, and spontaneous expressions in an attempt to conform to someone else's ideal. Another person's moral principles turn into your personal prison. Such a dynamic is often found in families, religious communities, and other rigid social structures where blind obedience is mistakenly taken for virtue. Jung viewed this pattern as a serious threat to the process of individuation, because where excessive moralism flourishes, self-knowledge is absent. The extreme moralist does not seek truth. Their goal is control, and when they cannot control the external world, they direct their efforts toward controlling the inner world of those around them. However, the moral controller is not the only personality type whose actions are determined by unconscious forces. There is another, even more volatile, unstable, and unpredictable type, the complex-ridden person. While the moralist suppresses and projects, the complex-ridden person is entirely at the mercy of the unconscious and reacts to its manifestations like a puppet pulled by emotional strings. Next, we will delve into this explosive area where consciousness loses control and traumas take over the psyche. The reader will be introduced to a personality type who might shower you with love today and destroy you tomorrow, without even realizing the reasons for their behavior. Imagine a situation: living side by side with someone whose behavior unpredictably oscillates from kindness and generosity to sudden outbursts of anger, sullen silence, and unfounded accusations. Compliments turn into demands, jokes into aggression, and displays of tenderness are perceived as a threat. In such an environment, every action becomes a step on a minefield. Such is the reality for those who share their lives with a personality influenced by unconscious complexes. Complexes, as Jung asserted, are autonomous clusters of emotions and memories, hidden in the depths of the unconscious, ready at any moment to seize control of consciousness. They can be compared to disparate sub-personalities, formed under the influence of traumas, emotional wounds, and unresolved conflicts. In his works, such as Psychological Types and Ego and the Unconscious, Jung describes in detail how these complexes can directly influence a person's behavior, causing them to react not to the current situation, but to echoes of the past. A casual remark can awaken painful memories of rejection, abandonment, or humiliation in the unconscious, and those around them become unwitting victims of this reaction. A person under the sway of a complex often does not realize that their actions are dictated by these internal forces. In moments of rage, deep sadness, or excessive resentment, they sincerely believe in the rationality of their actions, although they are actually experiencing unprocessed emotions. The problem is exacerbated by the fact that such manifestations are not constant, but occur episodically. Emotional outbursts are replaced by periods of clarity, tenderness, and remorse, which makes the connection with such a person even more complex and alluring. An illusion arises that they are not always like this, that sometimes they are wonderful. It is this hope that keeps one in the relationship, for there are moments of genuine intimacy and attachment. However, these bright periods are inevitably followed by unpredictable breakdowns, plunging one into the epicenter of an emotional storm. In attempts to restore harmony, a person begins to adjust, adapt, and limit themselves. They avoid certain topics, carefully weigh every word, trying not to awaken the dormant monster within the other person. But the cruel truth is that this monster is not awakened by external factors. It is always present within, in a latent state, awaiting any trigger to break free. And when it does, it consumes everything around it. According to Jung, unacknowledged complexes gradually colonize the psyche, beginning to speak, feel, and act on behalf of the person. In the case of a complex-ridden individual, this takeover occurs quite frequently. A person may be under the sway of an inferiority complex, a martyrdom complex, an abandonment complex, or a persecution complex, each with its own scenarios, emotions, and demands. And the more effort one puts into maintaining peace, the stronger the illusion that the uncontrollable can be kept under control. Life next to such a person turns into a constant waiting game. Emotional stability becomes unattainable, and the present is poisoned by ghosts of the past. Sooner or later, these ghosts begin to seep in, causing one to doubt oneself, one's memory, and one's feelings. Unwittingly, a person finds themselves colonized by another's unconscious. But the greatest danger is still ahead. For besides those who express their complexes with shouts and accusations, there are others, those who silently drain energy, leaving only emptiness in their wake. We are talking about psychic vampires who feed on the time, attention, and empathy of other people. It is with them that this cycle will conclude, revealing what Jung considered the key to escaping these unconscious jungles. There are individuals who seek not merely presence but the absorption of the life energy of those around them. They skillfully drain others' resources, avoiding overt aggression, resorting instead to veiled demands, chronic victimhood, and emotional dependence artfully masked as attachment. Such people can be called psychic vampires. This is the quietest and most destructive form of emotional depletion, one that Carl Jung himself warned about, although not using this exact term. In Jungian psychology, such behavior is viewed as a manifestation of unresolved symbiotic relationships, an unhealthy bond that hinders personal growth and blurs the boundaries of individuality. In his works, such as Ego and the Unconscious and Ion, Jung emphasized that symbiotic relationships pose a serious threat to the process of individuation, the path to wholeness. In such relationships, people cease to perceive themselves as separate individuals, seeing each other only as psychic extensions. It is in such a connection that the psychic vampire thrives, demanding constant attention, continuous support, and tireless presence. However, behind this seeming need lies an inner emptiness that cannot be filled from the outside. It all starts small, with an offer of help. Then personal time is given, and eventually, one must endure emotional abuse, justified by sympathy and understanding. Only with time does the realization come that all energy has been depleted, and the boundaries between oneself and the other person are blurred. The exhaustion becomes pervasive, affecting not only one's physical state, but the very essence of existence. There's a feeling as if one's soul is slowly but surely being drained, drop by drop, day by day. Jung spoke of people incapable of sustaining their own psyche, clinging to others like emotional parasites. And however harsh it may sound, it is a bitter truth. A psychic vampire does not strive for development. They prefer to be carried. However, the danger lies not only in exhaustion, but also in the dissolution of one's self. A sense of guilt emerges for needing personal space, for seeking quiet and solitude, for wanting to establish distance. The psychic vampire skillfully shifts roles, transforming from victim to accuser, from needy to manipulator. And before one realizes it, life turns into an endless attempt to avoid crises, maintain a precarious balance, and sustain a connection that destroys from within. Jung proposed a path to conscious awareness of the unconscious, applicable both to others and to oneself. For each of us, at certain moments in life, could have acted as a psychic vampire, a complex-ridden person, or a persona wearer. No one is immune to this. Everyone has their shadow, their pain. The only difference is who has the courage to look within themselves and who prefers to project their problems onto others. This text is a kind of mirror, reflecting the dynamics of relationships that bind, hurt, and keep us in a state of unconsciousness. If the reader has reached these lines, it means they are ready to see the truth, call things by their names, and be free. This is the first and most important form of freedom. Not to blame others, but to break free from captivity, regaining control over your own psyche.